And I'd like to start this event by acknowledging the Gadigal and Mongol people of the Eora Nation, whose lands Writing New South Wales is situated. I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where you're all joining us from today. So feel free to make your own acknowledgement of country in the chat box if you want to do that. I now welcome Belinda Murrell. Belinda worked as a travel writer and journalist before becoming the award-winning author of more than 35 books, ranging from picture books and junior fiction to adult nonfiction. Belinda's books include Meet Zoe and Zac, popular series The Sun Sword, Lulu Bell, and Pippa's Island. The historical novels, The Ivory Rose, The Locket of Dreams, The Forgotten Pearl, and The Lost Sapphire. Accolades include Honour Book Koalas, shortlisted 9 times for Young Australians Best Book Award, CBCA Notable 2012 and 2017, and highly commended for the Prime Minister's Literary Awards. In 2018, Belinda won the Koala Legend Award for her contribution to Australian children's literature. Her latest books include an adult non-fiction biblio-memoir, Searching for Charlotte, and The Golden Tower, a time slip fantasy for children. Also, Belinda is the director of the Writing New South Wales 2022 Kids and YA Festival happening shortly in June. And this morning, we'll be discussing Belinda's writing career, her writing practice, and what we can expect at this year's Kids and YA Festival. So thank you so much, Belinda, for joining us. How are you feeling this morning?
Oh, thank you so much, Martin. Well, I'm really nervous about this technology because it's dropped in and out a couple of times. So fingers crossed it works perfectly now.
Great. You have such an extensive and impressive bio. I feel like I was running out of breath reading that out. I find it really interesting that you started out as a travel writer and a journalist, and now you're an award-winning children's author. Can you talk to us a bit about that transition? You know, was children's writing something you always had your eyes on?
Absolutely. I went to university straight from school, and I remember as a child, my dad was a vet. I always wanted to be a vet, and my principal pulled me aside in year 12 and said, Belinda, you are so good at English, you're so good at writing, and you are so hopeless at maths and chemistry. Perhaps you should rethink your future, and perhaps you should be a writer because I feel you have a gift for it. And it was such a wonderful thing for her to do. And so I did. I completely changed my direction in year 12, went to university, and I studied communication and journalism, but I also did literature. And as part of that, I did children's literature and I did creative writing. So it was trying to get that vocational journalism plus also my love of creative writing and poetry and children's literature. So I have always loved children's literature. But of course I had to earn a living. So I worked as a technical writer, I worked as a journalist. And then when I had children, I was working as a freelance journalist and travel writer. And then as my kids grew older, they were the most voracious readers, just like I was as a child. And so it was this idea of starting to write stories for my own children. So my original audience was just 3 kids, my kids. And I spent 2 years writing my very first manuscript. And it was really for my son, Nick, who loved fantasy adventure. He loved codes and puzzles. He loved dangerous quests. And so I wrote this manuscript for him and read it to my children, and they loved it. And then I thought I'd be very, very, very brave and very, very naive. And I picked Penguin Random House, or Random House as it was then, the biggest publisher in Australia. And I thought, oh, I'll just start at the top, send it off, and of course I'll get published. And I had no idea about the industry. I had no idea how it worked, but I was just incredibly lucky. And Random House came back within a few weeks and said, Belinda, how do you feel about signing a 3-book deal? So that's how I started my career with Penguin Random House. It was a dream come true, really. But I had been working for so many years as a journalist and a writer, so my writing skills were strong. And because I had the kids and I was writing for them, every time they looked bored, I knew I had to cut that bit out. And so they really helped me start my career as a children's writer. And I just feel incredibly blessed because for 16 years now, I've been working full-time with the same publisher at Penguin Random House, so Walton. And together we've worked on over 30 books, and I've done other books with other publishers, but mostly with Penguin Random House.
Wow, that's amazing. I really liked what you said about having your kids reading your books and using them kind of as a gauge or editors in themselves.
Yeah,
Um,
they had a really good sense of because they loved reading so much, they had this really good sense of what made a good book. It was almost like they handed me the ingredients that I needed to put in my children's book because it was what my kids loved in books. And if they seemed to be bored, I'd have these lovely long descriptions, and kids don't have the patience for that. So I'd have to, I love that description, but it's got to go because kids don't have the patience for long, beautiful literary language. What they want is a really great story. And that was the
yeah.
number one lesson I learned from my kids.
And do you find that your experience in travel writing has informed your writing practice now?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things I love in my books and I love writing about, and it's almost one of the first places I start, is this sense of a really strong setting, and world building is one of my favorite things. I can spend months just creating this world, and that travel writing, I think, is what has informed that. It's that sense of place, sense of smell, using your five senses to bring the world alive. And to me, if the world doesn't come alive in my imagination, then I'm not interested in reading it or writing about it.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned before that you felt that you were quite lucky with how you entered into the industry. Um, I'm sure that's not the case for everyone. So do you think it is quite hard to get your foot in the door, or do you think you just have to take that risk and maybe you just have to be lucky?
Look, it is. It's an incredibly tough industry. Publishing is just, in my opinion, it's probably one of the toughest industries to crack into. And there are so many keen, aspiring writers. And I have many, many friends who spent years actually trying to get writing and trying to get their work published. And I think for me, it was that 20 years of writing that I had before I wrote my first book that helped me to make it a shorter process when the time came. I think the other thing is to be really involved in the industry. So, for example, I really got my first big break. I went to the Sydney Writers' Festival, and I happened to be introduced to Zoe Walton at the bar at the Sydney Writers' Festival, and we were having a glass of wine and chatting amongst everybody, and everybody else there was published writers. And then Zoe turned to me and she said, "Oh, Belinda, what about you? Do you write?" And I was just so, I guess, panicky and anxious. And I was just talking to a real life publisher, and somehow I managed to splutter out this elevator pitch where I said, "Yes, actually, I'm working on a book, and the book is about this." And I just gave a very succinct little explanation, a little elevator pitch. Totally unprepared. I had no idea I was going to be meeting a publisher on that day. And it's just that obviously I was obsessed with the book at the time, and I hadn't finished writing it. And she said, "Oh, that sounds really great. If you'd like me to have a look at it when you finished it, here's my card." And she handed me her card, which was like gold. And then that was the biggest spur. I raced home, and then I just worked day and night to get that book finished because I wanted to get it to her while she still
Mm.
vaguely remembered who I was. And
Yeah.
so I did. I finished the book, sent it to her, and I also sent it to Pippa at Curtis Brown. And so I sent it to them on the same day. And then Pippa rang me first, and she said, "I really love it. I want to send it out." And I said, "Well, I should let you know I've already sent it to Zoe Walton at Random House. She asked for it." And so Pippa rang up Zoe and said, "Okay, you've got a week to make up your mind because I'm going to send it out next week." And that sort of made fast tracked the whole thing for me, which was really, really, really lucky. And I feel like it was lucky that I was at the right place at the right time. The book was at the right stage where it wasn't the week I started, it was 2 years later. So it was nearly ready to go. And then I just, moved when that opportunity came. I jumped on it and just,
Mm.
just worked day and night to get it done.
Great. Um, and so your career spans 20 years and you've written, as you said, over 35 books. Even with all this experience, are there things that you still struggle with as a writer, and how do you overcome these?
Oh, yes, I do struggle with things. I struggle with, plotting. I always find the setting comes to me really easily. The character comes to me really easily. They come alive in my imagination, and it's the plotting I find really hard, and the structure. And I need to be really careful about that. And motivation comes really hard some days. This week I'm working on a new concepts, and I worked really hard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and yesterday there was admin, and I thought I'll just do the admin because that's easy. And working on this the new book is really hard and I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not. And so it can be really easy to get distracted and work on easy stuff instead of doing the hard stuff. So I try really hard to have a routine, to, you know, just sort of make myself do things, to set aside time. And I love deadlines because that makes me get it done. Whereas if you had all the time in the world, I would take all the time in the world and it would take me 20 years to write one story, not more than that. So yes, I think, and the other thing I find as a writer that's really hard is juggling the finances, and it's essentially a small business that I'm running, and you can have, you know, royalties only get paid twice a year, and then you get your ELR and your PLR, and then you're doing other things in between time, and it's that sort of keeping the I guess keeping that money flow happening. That is also a bit of a challenge when you've got deadlines and you're trying to write, but then you also have to put food on the table, pay the mortgage, and so on.
And so what would you say is the hardest thing about your job?
I think it is probably juggling everything. It's juggling my family, it's juggling my house, it's juggling my business, it's juggling deadlines and expectations from different people. And the other thing is juggling being asked to do stuff all the time. So, you know, as a writer, you know, I'll get dozens of emails from schools wanting you to do stuff for free. Can you come to our afternoon tea or our book week parade, or can you come and you know, speak at our charity dinner, or whatever it might be. And it's kind of protecting the writing time and protecting my energy and my creativity, while also you know, being a lovely person and doing some of these things that you get asked to do all the time. So yes, I think that's probably one of the hardest things, is actually protecting my writing time and using it wisely.
Yeah, learning how to say no as well.
Exactly.
Do you ever feel a weight of responsibility to tell kids stories with an important message, or can they just be fun and, you know, without that important message?
Martin, that is such a great question, and I find it a balance, because I think that kids need fun books to read. And I think I see kids these days have so much competition for their time. You know, they could be on social media, they could be playing a computer game, they could be skateboarding, they could be doing all their homework or their sport. So for them to read, it has to be better than the competition for that moment. So the book has to be engaging, it has to be enthralling, it has to be so good they want to stay up all night turning the pages. So if you have heavy messages and themes, it's a bit like forcing kids to have nasty medicine before they go to bed. And of course they don't want to do that. But also reading is so important because it teaches kids about the world, it teaches them empathy, it teaches them to look at other people, at the world through other people's eyes, and to hear different voices, and to learn about diversity and so many things that matter. So you just got to have this really light touch. So I would say yes, all of my books have got what I think are important messages or themes, but I try to be really light-handed with them. And occasionally my publisher might pull me up because she feels I'm being heavy-handed, and you go, oh yes, sorry, yep, missed that, and you pull back a bit. But yes, it's that real balance where it's got to be fun, it's got to be engaging and enthralling, but it does also have to have things for kids to think about as well. And I think kids are like adults. I mean, why do we read? We read to be entertained, we do read to be educated, and we read to escape. So I think that you keep those things in mind. That means it's you're on the right track, I think.
Great. And I do have to admit, I don't know too much about the kids YA landscape. So for a novice like me, can you explain what the industry is like in Australia, and maybe tell us what changes you've noticed, for better or worse, in the kids YA publishing industry since you started? I know that's kind of a broad and big question.
Sure.
Feel free to interpret as you'd like.
Okay, I'll give it a crack, and you can pull me back into line if I go too off topic. Look, I find the kids and YA publishing industry is the most wonderful group of people. They are all so passionate about children's literature. They feel that children's literature can change the world, and I strongly believe that. And they're warm and supportive, and sometimes I'll go to a a literary festival or something, and you'll have all the very serious adult authors who are feeling very important, and then the kids authors are much more playful, don't take themselves too seriously, are lots of fun. And I've seen serious authors sort of dismiss a kids author, think, oh, they just write kids books, not realizing that they're talking to someone who's actually sold, 1 million books, or have done something amazing, are actually making a living writing their books. So, but they don't behave, they're not, they don't behave as though they're superstars. I think it has become a lot harder to get published. So I wonder if my wonderful good luck story, if that would happen quite as easily now. And in the last 2 years, I've noticed even really established authors like myself and some of my friends, projects have been delayed, or publishers have just been a bit slower to sort of publish, sign up the next contract or the next book or whatever, or be a bit more cautious about it, because it's like everything. There's problems with print prices, there's problems with the supply chains of paper, there's problems with the fuel prices that mean it's more expensive to get books from the warehouse to the bookstores, and so on and so on. So the whole industry has, it's been a really tough couple of years for everybody, and I think that's really has changed the landscape of how the industry works. Definitely, I've noticed that. Yeah, so I think it's, overall, I just think it's the most amazing industry to work in, and the people are just so passionate and wonderful, and they're doing such great things. So I feel very, very blessed to be part of it.
And yeah, going off that, from my experience working in this role and working on the Kids and YA Festival that's happening in June, I really do get that sense that Kids and YA authors are really passionate and friendly and cheery and very naturally playful, which is kind of super refreshing and nice.
Yeah.
And it seems like a really close and supportive community.
Very much so.
Yeah. So do you rely much on this community for your writing or on your day-to-day?
Yeah, I do, because it can be quite a lonely occupation, because I work at home most of the time in my office. My dog, who's banging on the door, if you hear the strange noises, that's my dog. Thanks, Rosie. So it can be really important, because even though I work with my publishers, and when the book gets close to being finished and ready to go to the printer, we're working together very closely, but I spend many months on my own working on it by myself. And so it's really great to have this community where you can just say, oh, I'm having a bad day, what about you? Or, I've had this great success, isn't that exciting? And nobody else actually really understands quite the same way how exciting that is, or how desperately disappointing the challenges can be. And so we have we get together and have lunches, or we get together on Facebook and have little share stories, and have you got your royalties yet, or mine are late, or all these sorts of questions we kind of share with each other. And it's really great. And the thing I love the most, pre-pandemic, haven't done it since then, but we used to go on tour together. So Penguin Random House had what they called the Puffin Bus, and they'd put sort of 8 or 10 authors together on the bus for a week in Melbourne and a week in Sydney or wherever it might be, and we'd all hang out together on the bus. Then we'd go and do presentations, we'd go to bookstores and do book signings, we'd do make videos and all this kind of stuff. So you're actually spending pretty much all day every day together on a bus, touring around schools and bookstores and promoting the books, which was so much fun. And it was just, you bounce off each other creatively, and yeah, it was just so much fun. So that's something I have really missed, is that chance to spend time one-on-one with other authors and just kind of chat about what you're doing.
Yeah, you make it sound like you guys are some rock stars on tour.
I tell you what, when you go into these schools, you feel like a rock star. If you walk into a school and they go, oh my God, she's here. Oh my God, she's I love her. And you just walk in and they hug you, and they get so excited, and can you sign my punched up bit of paper? And it's a lot of fun, which is a lot different to sitting in your own office for months on end all by yourself, working away, hoping you're creating something that someone's going to love.
I'm sure you do miss it, pre-COVID. How much of your job is actually doing the school visits?
Well, in a normal year, it would be, I think about 3 months of the year would be either probably about 6 weeks on when a new book comes out of marketing, a marketing tour, and school visits, store visits, library events, festivals, and then about another 6 weeks of the year, which is around Book Week, which is in August, where all the schools love to have authors in, and there are lots of associated events around that. So, and then, for example, in July, which is just before my new book comes out, I'm flying up to promote Longreach in far western Queensland with a few top authors. So with Jacqueline Harvey, with Louise Park and Wilka Starkus. And the four of us are flying on a light plane out to Longreach. And then we're speaking to kids from all over Western Queensland that are coming together for this sort of, it's called Storyfest Out West. And so we'll be out there for 4 days together. I'm so excited about this because this will be my first kind of traveling tour since you know what. So yeah, that kind of thing is really great. So yeah, I normally have about 3 months of the year where I do that kind of stuff, but it's kind of throughout the year.
And have you ever been able to tour internationally? This is just out of my own curiosity, where children take you.
I wish, not so much touring, as in marketing the books internationally, even though my books are sold internationally and have been translated into quite a few different languages. I mean, for example, I would so love to go to Brazil, and I get fan mail from Brazil and from all these unusual places, Turkey, the Czech Republic, South Africa, Afrikaans, that sort of thing. But what I do is I use my holidays very wisely, and I love to travel, being a travel writer. And so every now and again, I'll plan a big travel trip and I'll go and I'll research something. So my latest book, which came out a few last year, is called The Golden Tower, and it's set in an Italian Renaissance-inspired world. So obviously I got the idea for that when I was traveling with my family initially. And so I made sure that our trip involved doing all these really adventurous things that I could use in my book. And the second book in this series is set in a sort of a Venetian-inspired world. And so my daughter and I had a week in Venice 3 years ago, where we sort of, just walked the alleyways, got lost, went island hopping, went on, little ferries and so on. And so that was the inspiration and a lot of the research, the setting research for The Silver Sea, which comes out in August. And so quite a few of my books, I've been lucky enough to travel overseas and use that inspiration. And it's my family holiday and I pay for it. And obviously elements of that are tax deductible when it makes it into a book. But, yes, that's the fun part. That's really fun.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm just going to go into the study that I found that the Australia Council for the Arts did with Macquarie University and Copyright Agency. They did a study called Success Story International Rights Sales of Australian Authored Books between 2008 and 2018. They found that demand for Australian children's books is booming. They found that more than half of all recorded deals were books targeted at younger readers, including picture books, which was 21%, middle grade 27%, teen, and young adult was 6%. So why do you think there's such a demand from an international audience for Australian books?
Well, I like to think that's because Australian authors are so brilliant, of course. But I think, our stories are fresh, they're exciting. And I think also we have elements of, that exotic setting, which I think kids are really fascinated by. And so, yeah, it's lovely to see. So I'm the same. My Lulu Bell series has been published internationally, and it's just so beautiful to get fan mail from little girls in Brazil and really all around the world. So I think there's something about the books that perhaps they're really fresh, that they're a bit different, perhaps. And so I think that's really great. And I think most children's authors who work full time rely a lot on that international market to subsidise their income, because Australia, obviously, most of my books are sold in Australia, but it is, compared to America, it's a fairly small market because our population's so much less. So it's great when you get your books out overseas. It's always a thrill.
Yeah, it would be. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions when it comes to writing for children? or young adults? I think the most obvious one is that because, you know, children are your audience, it's easy peasy, which I'm sure definitely isn't the case.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's really interesting because I have had so many people, I can't tell you how many over the years, that go, oh, Belinda, when are you going to write a real book? And I'm thinking, do you know how long it takes to write and how much crafting goes into it? And I think the biggest misconception is that it's A, easy, and B, that you're somehow dumbing things down for kids. And the reality I found is that children are actually a really tough audience. In fact, if they don't love the book straight away, they don't give it, like an adult would go, look, I'm not really enjoying this, but I'll give it a chapter or two, or maybe 3 or 4, or I'll finish it just to see what happens if it gets any better. But kids kind of, you know, if you haven't grabbed them in the first page or two, they'll just throw that book against the wall and that's it. They'll never pick it up again, and they'll probably never pick up another book by you again. So, and the other thing is that the craft is everything. With kids' books, structure is really important because they've got to be quite fast moving. You have to be very mindful of your language and making sure that it's specific for different age groups. So obviously it's very different to write a picture book, to a junior fiction, to a chapter book, to a middle grade, to an upper middle grade, to a young adult. So there's so much going on there in terms of language, word limits, even down to sentence structure. So there's so much to think about, and if you get it wrong, you know, you've lost them really. So I think that's the biggest misconception. And I just think that also I think kids are very when they love a book, they love it passionately, and that book can and will change their life. So one of my greatest joys in life is letters that I receive from young readers telling me how much they love my books, which of course is wonderful. But what I really love is actually getting letters from young adults that tell me that they read my books when they were younger, and that the person that they have, the adult that they have become, has been shaped by the values that they learned, or the ideas that they learned, or from a particular book of mine that they loved and read over and over and over again. So it became a talisman for them, and that they feel that that book has shaped who they are and how they think about the world. And to me, you know, that A, it makes me cry, and B, I feel that is just such an enormous responsibility that I'm so mindful of, and such a joy, which, you know, I don't know that many adult authors would get letters quite so beautiful and passionate as that.
Yeah, well, that's really beautiful, actually. And just now moving on to the Kids YA Festival. So we've been working on this together for a bit now, and it's happening on Saturday, June 25. You've curated a fantastic program, which we'll be announcing quite soon. Can you give the audience here a little taste of what they can expect from the festival?
Oh, I am so excited about the festival program. A, because, you know, it's been delayed for 2 years. And so it's so nice to be able to finally do it. And I just think that this festival is iconic. It's made so many writers that I know, it's made their careers. It's been the launching pad for their careers. I can remember my very first festival before I was published, going along and just being in awe of meeting these amazing authors and just learning so much and sucking it in like a sponge. And so when I'm planning this program, I take myself back to that point and think about how important it was for me to learn about the industry, to learn about the business, and to network and meet people and make friends. You know, some of my closest writer friends I met in these very early festivals. And I've also seen amazing authors who pitched at the Kids and YA Festival and no one had ever heard of them, and now they're just, you know, huge children's authors. People like Oliver Pomervan, I was there in the audience when he gave his very first pitch to the guy who became his agent, and now he's, you know, a fellow author at Penguin, and we toured together. It's just those sorts of stories are lovely. Anyway, that's the background. This festival, my aim was to try and bring together some of Australia's most wonderful, most successful authors and get them to talk about their craft, how they write their books, the nitty-gritty of their writing practice, their writing craft, and share their top secrets. And these authors, people like Deborah Bella, Tristan Banks, Kate Forsyth, Mick Elliott, Matt Cosgrove, I mean, they have sold collectively millions of books all around the world. They are so super successful and so generous with their advice. And then combining that with other great authors who are award-winning, all through their stages of their career, but also fresh new voices. For example, there's a wonderful journalist called Kristen Durrell, and she has just signed a 4-book deal with a major publisher, and she's been working at this for 10 years, and I've been with her along the journey. And it's so exciting for her. She's just on the cusp of the beginning of her career. And so we've got these fresh new voices sharing how they did it and what they went through and what they've learned and what they think are most important. And of course, getting the publishers there is great. We're getting a couple of publishers from Penguin Random House, like Zoe Walton and Zoe Bishara, down to we've got Danny V from Larrikin Press, which is one of Australia's newest and smallest publishers. So we've got that breadth in the publishing industry as well, sharing their knowledge, sharing their ideas of what's happening in the publishing industry, and trends for the future, and how, what they see things happening in the next couple of years, which I think will be just always so fascinating to hear. So yes, I'm excited.
I'm very excited as well. And you make me feel excited the way you talk about it.
Very passionate about it. I think it's I just think this sort of festival is just so important to writers of all stages of their career, whether they're emerging, aspiring, or really well established. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to learn, and we never stop learning.
No, and so one of the key focuses of the festival revolves around examining, emerging trends, as you said before. Can you elaborate on what these trends are and maybe how they'll be explored at the festival?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure exactly what the publishers are going to say, but this is my kind of feeling about it. And I think that obviously we've been through the last 2 years, the pandemic has changed so much about our world. And I think that's reflected in publishing trends as well. So they're talking about the emergence of books as an escape from the reality of the real world, books that are exploring things like kindness and the importance of friendship and building resilience and self-determination, things like that. I know that there's been a big trend in things like graphic novels and more playful kinds of illustrated books for older readers, not just for younger readers. YA, I think I'll be really interested to hear what the YA authors have to say about how they feel about it. But obviously we're seeing this enormous focus on diversity and books at our own voices in terms of hearing from people from different cultural, ethnic, social, all sorts of different voices from different backgrounds. And I think that is just such a great trend, because for far too long, it was sort of very British Anglo white male and British Anglo white female, but whatever. So it's just great to have these this diversity of voices coming through. And so I think that there's some of the trends I'll talk about, and also perhaps how the pandemic is affecting the industry itself, which would be great to hear about, because it's constantly changing. And you hear all these things like for ages it was, the ebook will be the death of the printed book, but clearly that hasn't happened. Printed book sales are still so strong, and were particularly strong during the pandemic. So that was, so I think that'll be great.
And before we go into some of the questions from the audience, I'm sure there are a lot of people here who are interested in becoming, published children's or book or YA authors. Do you have any advice to share with them?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think don't do what I did. As in, when I started, I was so naive. I knew nothing about the publishing industry at all, and it was a very, very steep learning curve, very fast. So I think one of my first tips would be to learn about the publishing industry and how it works, and things like how royalties work and how book sale and return works, and just sort of learn about how the industry actually works. Because I think then you don't get any nasty surprises then. Like, for example, when I got offered my first advance, I was thinking, you are kidding me. It took me 2 years to write this book and you're offering me this tiny amount of money. So I think that learning about the industry is really important. The second thing would be to find your tribe, which is just surround yourself by other writers and support other writers and buy their books and go to their launches, go to festivals and meet other people, network. I just think that the industry is so much, and more than perhaps the broader publishing industry, is so much about the people and the publishers, the agents and the other authors and other writers. So I think the more people you know in the industry, I think the easier it is to navigate your way in this world. And my third tip would be, my third tip is going to be pack your bags and travel, because that's one of my favorite things to do in terms of experiencing things and having interesting things to write about. So it's just that idea of having to be an interesting writer, you have to have an interesting life. And that's one of my biggest mantras is having this idea of having an interesting life. So I've got lots of rich experiences to draw upon in my writing, whether I'm, whoever I'm writing for. So I think, and it's better than the one that is read, which obviously is the most important thing to do.
Thank you for those 3 tips. So going into the audience questions now, everyone seems to want to know, is it okay to self-publish if you keep getting rejected by publishers?
Look, I think self-publishing is a huge trend. And I think you just need to sort of, again, this comes back to understanding the industry, and there are different layers of self-publishing. So there is obviously what sometimes is called vanity press, where basically you pay the whole process, and then you get a box of books, and then you sell those books. And as long as you understand that that they're not going to be appearing in bookstores unless you go out and actually drop some off on consignment or whatever, and that you have to do everything. You have to be across everything, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. That's one end of the self-publishing spectrum. And then there's different layers where there's hybrid publishing, where you pay for some of it and they support some of it, and then they help you get it into bookstores and so on. But obviously there's a huge trend there, and I know people who love self-publishing their own work. They love the control. They love doing things at their own time and their own pace. And obviously, there are thousands of books every year that are self-published. So, personally, I haven't done it that way because I love being traditionally published. And the other thing to understand is it's very, very rare. Some people think that if they self-publish the book, then they can show that to a publisher, and the publisher will go, wow, that's fabulous, let's publish that. And that almost never happens. So, it occasionally happens, but mostly once you've self-published it, that's it. That's your bite of the cherry. So I think a lot of people who are self-published don't quite understand. They think if they wrote 2 books in a series, then the publisher would buy the rest of them, but that's not going to happen. So yeah, anyway, that's but we will have at the festival, we are having a panel on self-publishing, where we have 3 different experts who've all traveled different routes and have self-published, and they're all 3 of them are amazing, and they would have much more useful advice than me, because I've never done it. So I'm just picking up on things I know that I've heard about.
Great. And Emma asks, do you have any tips for knowing when your book is ready to send out?
Oh gosh, Emma, that is such a good question. And I struggle with this even now. My publisher is waiting on early chapters for my new project now, and she wants them now, and I'm not ready to send them because I know they're not good enough yet. So it's really, I'm lucky in that my publisher knows what I can do, and that she knows if I send her a half-baked chapter, or even with bits missing from it, that we will fix it. But obviously, when you don't know the publisher and you're sending something for the first time, you want to make it as perfect as you can. So my advice to you there would be to get it as polished as you think it can be, then share it with someone else, and preferably some kids, and get them and other people to get their advice on how they think it is, and get them to mark out for you where they think it might be a bit boring, or where there's too much description, or so on. Read it out aloud. I think that's just absolutely key, to read your work out aloud. Even a 70,000 word book, I still use the function on my computer so that I can listen to it, or get someone else if it's shorter to read it to me, so I can see where they stumble. And at some point, you just have to go, okay, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So it's really important. That's why I love deadlines, is that you go, right, work towards a deadline, get it as good as I can, send it off, and then we work through that editing process to get it as great as we can. So I know that's a really vague answer. I'm sorry, Emma, but it is. It's just sort of, it's never going to be, in my mind, it's never ever going to be good enough to send. But you just have, at some point, you just have to go, right. And then the other thing I would suggest, which I did in the early days, is write it, put it away for a few months, and then get it out. And when you read it again, you go, oh gosh, like, did I really write that? And I missed that completely. And so, I think that's a really good thing, is to put it away. And then in our publishing schedules, in my publishing schedule, we always have lots of kind of bat where we can put it away for a while. So I write it, put it away for a few months, goes to my editor, then I get it back and I can look at it with fresh eyes. And I think with fresh eyes, that's the key.
I think that's really great advice. Rebecca asks, do you have any advice on what to do when you receive conflicting feedback from reputable editors / mentors when revising?
That is a really great question, Rebecca. And sometimes even in my publishing team at Penguin Random House, my publisher will say something and my editor will say something, and I'll do that. And then, you just go, well, who do I always go with? My publisher, because she's the boss. So I think what you have to do is you have to choose what feels right to you, what's true to your vision of your story is really important, because sometimes if you change things because someone else says it, it's so subjective and you're not happy with it, and then it's not quite right because it doesn't really work. So either choose someone that you really trust and just go with their advice, or choose the advice that sits best in your heart and makes you feel that it's true to your story and your vision of your story. I hope that helps, Rebecca.
Fiona asks, do you have any advice on increasing the sales / shelf life of your book in a quick turnover market?
Okay, yeah, Fiona, it is so crucial to market, and that's why I set aside a good 6 weeks or 2 months when the book comes out, or really longer, because Jen Storer has this fantastic, who's an author in Victoria, has this fantastic quote, which is quite tragic, really, and she says the average book has a shelf life of a tub of yogurt, it's actually the average book has a shelf life of about 3 months. Children's books are lucky because they tend to have a longer shelf life. So we just plan a really big publicity push when the book comes out, and I'll just make sure I'm out there on the road doing lots of school visits, bookstore signings, library events, social media, and just trying to, but also building up in the lead up to that book. So, for example, here, Searching for Charlotte, when that came out about a year ago, part of the contract with the National Library of Australia was that we had to do a really long social media campaign for it. So we actually started at the day we signed the contract, and we just had this regular little trickle of social media posts about our research, about our discoveries, about things that happened along the way. And it was about a year before the book came out of constant social media presence, and then a big push when the book came out. So absolutely crucial to get that out there. In terms of shelf life, really most bookstores, the way things work is there are 12 weeks. So the publisher sends a box of, they can order a box of books, and they don't have to pay for those books. And they sit on the shelf for 12 weeks. And then at the end of the 12 weeks, if they haven't sold, they go back to the publisher. And if they keep them past that date, the bookshop has to pay for them. So therefore, mostly they get sent back, unless they're classics or books that are, that they know that they're going to sell next week if they haven't sold last week. And so the only way that you can extend the shelf life is by building that brand and building that publicity and getting your name out there and getting people constantly coming in and asking for that particular book, because obviously every month thousands of books come out and they just sweep those shelves clean and the new ones come in. So it's tough.
Excellent. And just on that, I'm curious about where am I? Sorry, I'm trying to look at my questions. I'm curious about how much self-promotion is required as a my for, and are you active on social media and promoting your stuff
Yeah,
through there?
it's crucial, absolutely crucial, the self-promotion, which personally, and especially at the beginning, I found really difficult because I'm happy to write about other people and I'm happy to talk about other people, but I found it really difficult in the beginning to talk about myself and I felt like I was blowing my own trumpet constantly, which we're always, brought up as nice young ladies not to do. So I found it quite tough in the beginning. So every contract that I sign has a statement in there saying that I will do social media and I will do everything I can to promote the book. And I think that's really the difference between authors that are successful and authors who may not be as successful is that hard work of marketing the books and getting out there. And I remember at the beginning of coming back to the pandemic again, but in the beginning of about March 2020, when we were all, kind of thinking, I had a book that had just come out. I had another book that was coming out that year, and we're all panicking and thinking, what are we? And in a week, I had dozens and dozens of engagements just pulled out, which was my whole, months of income just went in a week. So the last thing I was thinking about was social media. And the next thing I get is about 2 weeks later, I get a letter from or an email from the head of Penguin marketing saying, Belinda, now is not the time to stop, promoting yourself. Now is the time that we need to start creating more content and doing more things. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, what am I going to post? My dinner? It's, yeah, it is. I feel often that there's a bit of a relentless pressure to actually promote yourself and particularly on social media, and have a really schmick website and all of those things, which, obviously as an author, you have to pay for all of that yourself. The publisher does support us, but again, it's mostly the superstars that get the support from the author. I remember an aspiring author or an emerging author coming up to me at a festival and saying, well, Belinda, it sounds fantastic. Your publisher puts you on a bus with these authors and sends you around to all these schools and does this and that. How do I get my publisher to do it? And she'd had one picture book published. And I went, well, probably the best thing to do there is to, you've got to do it yourself for quite a long time until you've got enough of a backlist that the publisher, it's worth their while investing in that kind of intensive promotion for you. So and for me, it took years before they were, I did it by myself for years before I started to get that really strong financial investment from the publisher in the marketing.
Right. I actually just quickly want to go back to Searching for Charlotte, because I find it very, very fascinating that, writing children's books is in your blood. So obviously, for those of you who don't know, Kate Forsyth, your sister is also a well-accomplished and awarded kids author. Can you tell the audience a bit about Searching for Charlotte and who Charlotte is?
Absolutely. So one of the reasons perhaps why I always thought it would be really easy for me to be a writer, an author, is because I grew up on the stories of my great-great-great-great-grandmother, whose name is Charlotte Waring-Atkinson, who wrote the very first children's book that was ever published in Australia. It was published in 1841 and it was called A Mother's Offering to Her Children by a lady long resident in New South Wales. And for a long time, no one outside the family knew who had actually written this book. And so I was always by that. And their daughter Louisa was the first Australian-born female journalist and Australian-born female novelist. And James Atkinson, her father, was also a published author. So I felt like and there are many other writers in our family, like many, many. So I feel like we grew up in a family of writers. And Kate and I were always fascinated with the story of her life. And because she was a 19th century woman, a lot of the story of her life was long forgotten, visible really. And I found it quite extraordinary that she was such an amazing and fascinating woman, and yet no one knew about her. I mean, someone said to me, she should be on a stamp, she should be on our currency, she should have suburbs named after her, but couldn't do any of that. But my sister and I decided we'd spend 2 years of our life researching, digging through the archives of the National Library, the Mitchell Library, going to the UK and walking in her footsteps of her early life. And the book was published by the National Library, but on condition, we wanted to write a biography of Charlotte's life, but the National Library wanted it to be a combined biography and memoir of our lives growing up in a literary family and how it influenced our aspirations, our writing practice, knowing that we had this history. And yeah, so that's it. It was a absolutely fascinating journey. 2 years of our lives, and we worked together on the book, and we wrote chapter by chapter. And it was released about a year ago by the National Library of Australia, and was their best-selling book that year. So we were pretty chuffed with that.
Yeah,
Really
you have
chuffed.
to be. That sounds amazing. 2 more questions
Yes.
from the audience. Jemima asked, what do you enjoy doing on your school visits?
Well, other than being mobbed by the children, which I did confess that I enjoyed, I just love their enthusiasm and their passion, and I just love talking to the kids, answering their questions, hearing their ideas. And to me, as a writer who writes for children, it's that immersing myself in that hubble bubble of their energy and enthusiasm and passion. And so, and chatting to the librarians and the teachers and finding out what's happening and observing, seeing what kids are doing in the playground, how they're speaking, what they're obsessed by. Is it unicorns this year or something else? Those sorts of things. So, and it's just such a sharp contrast to my normal life of months spent in completely immersed in my own brain and in my own office. And so, yeah, and I just love kids. I just think they're, they're so energetic and wonderful. They're our future. So I love it.
Great. And last one is from Rebecca, and I'm happy to answer this one if you want. She asked, when does the Kids and YA Festival go on sale?
Oh, you go, Martin. Rebecca.
So we will be announcing the program, and the tickets will be on sale on Monday. So keep an eye out on Newsbite as well, our e-newsletter. So sign up to that. You can follow the link on our website. And yeah, we're really excited to see you all there. We hope you can make it on the 25th of June, which is a Saturday. That's when the Kids and YA Festival will be.
And for any of you that are interested, I'm also running a workshop, an intensive writing for children workshop on this Sunday, which is part of the festival. So a separate part of the festival. So that's something to look out for as well, because that'll be so much fun.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that as well.
Jump the gun.
But that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much for being here at First Friday, and thank you so much, Belinda, for joining us. Our next First Friday will be held on Friday, the 3rd of June with Bridget Mullane. You can register for that online now. As Belinda said, again, her course Writing Beloved Children's Books is on 26th of June as part of the festival weekend. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at another Writing New South Wales event soon.
Thanks so much, Martin, for all your great questions too. That was great.
No worries at all. Anytime. It was a really great conversation. And thank you for all your brilliant responses and generous responses.
Thank you. Great. Bye, everyone. Have a really lovely, lovely weekend and enjoy this gorgeous sunshine that we're having in Sydney.